What's up? Today we have a rather spicy episode. We're painting Fallen Company of Sons of Guilliman chapter, who, as you probably already guessed, are Ultramarine successors. Now, I have a particular vision for this build, and it features a Stormbolter. I have this one from 2015 Devastator's kit, and it's looking kind of fugly. Barrels are just a monolithic block, and the whole gun has bit too much chonk for my liking. So I took a much better detailed one from Chaos Terminator's kit, although it's on the wrong side and arm is huge. So basically, I have to take hand from one and graft it onto the other. I'm mostly using my sprue cutters for hacking bits apart, but when I need to be less destructive, I switch to a razor blade. All right, done. For his helmet, I've wanted to give him a beaky because I really like the design. But in order to match the reference art, I've added the top knot. This was sourced from the Heretics kit, specifically this noggin. Here I thought that it will be a nice touch to go back and add the marksman's honor. It's a good way of showing his previous allegiance, and it's usually the recipients of it that gets some kind of specialist weapons. So his war gear makes a little more sense. To wrap up kit bashing, I've attached the hand to the arm, once again from Heretics. This didn't fit well at all, so I've mixed up some epoxy putty and filled the gap. I haven't bothered to sculpt any detail, since in the end, it's not going to be visible at all. Most of the other bits are from Legionaries and the sword arm came from Chosen, and as it is tradition, I've printed up a retro body. Let's get some paint on this guy. I've started with my favorite black primer from MRP. Straight from the bottle, works like a charm. For the main color, I got some Duncan's Marine Blue. I apply it with an airbrush, gradually building up the color with few coats. You can see that I start spraying on my painting handle before going over to the model. This allows me to check my paint and avoid potential disasters. Wow, nice ultramarine, dude. Now we can begin brush painting with blocking out the base coats, first with black for the top knot, gun casing, and soft joints of the armor. Aptly named Sword Hilt Burgundy for that nice splash of color, and eyes were painted white. It's much better to paint them on this stage because it's going to be annoying to touch up any potential mistakes with everything around it done already. For silver, I've used my old faithful gunmetal. Also, I've just recently learned that these bits on the Space Marine's cute little earmuffs should be metallic. Then several details were picked out with Chaos Bronze for some variety. And lastly, a small touch of bronze on the bolter shells. With all the base coats down, I've moved to the shading step. I've recently did some testing with washes, and I've arrived at the conclusion that I kind of hate them. So instead, I've decided to attempt manual shading with our base blue mixed 50-50 with off black. At first, this may look like an intimidating technique, but to my surprise, it's actually really simple and rewarding to do. You just got to hit that sweet thinning ratio and have small amount of paint on the brush. I can't really say how much to thin because I just do it by feel, testing on palette, and when it feels right, I go for it. Due to the paint being really watered down, you have to go over the model 3 or sometimes even 4 times, but that's why this method is so easy to control. And there we go, nicely shaded blue with no cleanup required. I've repeated the same steps for the pink, with appropriate color. Also, while I was doing this, I've noticed that I've straight up forgot to paint this little tooth growing out of his armor. While I do want to step away from using washes for normal paints, they will still work fine for metals. Thanks to their somewhat glossy finish, they keep them nice and shiny. When it comes to edge highlights, I'm pretty terrible at doing progressively thinner lines. So instead, my style is doing lines as thin as I can from the start and then covering smaller and smaller portions of them with brighter colors. For the blue armor, I'll do 3 layers of highlights, while the rest of the details we'll do with 1 or max 2. Geez, that took a while. Now we can proceed to painting eyes. This was done with my usual method with contrast paints, but this time I've tried out Baal Red instead of my tried and true Blood Angels. Camera doesn't really pick it up, but this red is really bright, bit too much for my taste. So I gave it 2 coats of Nuln Oil to knock it down a notch. For the last step, I've got myself some custom printed transfers, specifically for this warband. These work just like your normal decals, but you have to cut it out by yourself. I've sprayed the shoulder pad with a tiny amount of gloss varnish, just to be safe, and applied it with the help of Tamiya Mark Fit. Once decal was sitting snugly on the surface, I've sprayed over it with matte to blend it with the surface. And with that, I've called it done.